Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be covering the most frequently asked questions that we often see. We made a post on our Instagram asking people any questions that they would want answered, and we've also pulled a lot of questions that we see quite frequently in either our YouTube comments or our emails as well. So without further ado, let's get started. The first question, and also the most frequently asked question, is when are controllers going to be in stock again, and why don't we buy more or get more in stock because we're always selling out so fast? And that is a bit of a complex question, but given the global state of the economy right now, just lead times, supply across the board is a lot slower than it normally is. And at any given time, we have open orders with ASI, and ASI has open orders with their suppliers, and there's just that, give and take across the supply chain, and it takes time. It's not necessarily a monetary issue, as it is just a lead time and shipment issue. The bigger the orders that you put in, the longer the lead time is going to be, so there's a balance between frequency of orders and size of orders, and right now we feel like we're in a good spot with them. We will have more orders coming up at the beginning of the year, but for now we are still waiting on more stock. So the other thing to consider with that is that we are the only company as it stands that only sells stuff that we have in stock. You need to be wary of people that are selling pre-orders on a given time frame, because often those time frames aren't met and there's a lot of empty promises there. We pride ourselves on being a company that once we get your money, your order will be shipped out within a week. And I think that's a big appeal to a lot of people. And we try and keep it as fair as we can. We announce, a time and date at which stock will be posted on our website, and people who are diligent and are on time, ready to check out, they do get kits, and we think that's the best way to do it.
In relation to that question, we also often get asked how many we're selling. And while that's not something that we're ever going to just specifically say how many we're selling every time, we've never sold less than 20, and we will occasionally sell up to 80 at a time. So the people who say, oh, we're only selling 5 and that's why we sell out so quick, or that we're hoarding controllers and we only release a couple to give the illusion that we have high demand, that's not the case at all. We typically would do a drop of 50 and they sell out as quick as they sell out. That's how many ASI sends us, and that's how many we post for sale. Get asked is, are we going to be releasing an app? A lot of other sellers in this space are releasing apps for their controllers, and this is something that we are going to be doing. As of now, we're very satisfied with the amount of parameters that you can change on the A-Grider app. So our kit does technically come with an app in which you can change parameters. However, it's not made by us, and it doesn't have every single feature that ASI has to offer. Our app that we plan to release from our company to go with our controllers should have built-in throttle adjustment as well as motor calibration. Those are really the only two things that the A-Grider app doesn't currently support. If you haven't seen our latest video, we cover the A-Grider now does permanent voltage switching just by the press of a button, so go check that out if you have not yet.
So the next question that we get asked fairly frequently is if we support variable Regen. So this could be in the form of a thumb throttle or a twist throttle on your opposite hand. Some people want variable Regen on a foot brake to mimic a dirt bike. And the answer to this is that we have and we can, tune these components for your Sur Ron. However, we typically recommend not doing it for a couple of reasons. I think there's a misconception that electric foot brake will be able to resemble or replicate a hydraulic brake. And it's just really not the case with Regen. A foot brake or whatever type of control input you're putting in is just basically some sort of function on a potentiometer with a voltage range, and you just don't get that pressure buildup and feedback. And also the Regen function itself just doesn't really act how people expect. So we've had almost every customer that we do this for end up not using it because they're not satisfied with how it functions. We set it up to use the stock brake cutouts so that when you pull the brakes, it increases your regen in the rear. So we find that that's like kind of a happy medium between having that adjustable regen braking based on whether or not you're holding your brakes versus the variable regen. That being said, with the Egg Rider, you can have two different modes that are easy to switch through, and you can set one to be low or no regen braking and the other to be high regen braking. So if at one point you're going down a hill, you can switch from none or low to high regen braking with the click of a button. And for most people, I think this will function better than the variable regen. Another thing to add is that there are some bugs that do arise with variable regen stuff. We have had situations where if a customer is putting in their variable regen input at the same time they're putting in a throttle input, there has been a bug that is known to ASI where the bike will throttle in reverse, which is very dangerous, especially on a motorcycle. So we just kind of caution staying away from that.
So another question that we frequently get asked is, when will our batteries be available? We've teased them a lot. This bike behind us has one, and we pride ourselves on not selling things that we don't have in stock. So there's a lot of other companies out there where you can put money down and put your name down, and you will get a battery at some point. But we personally do not want to take the financial risk. We've said it a couple times, this is a hobby to us. We do not do this full time. We're also in school and have our own jobs. So we just like to sell the things we have. We like to sell a good product and take care of our customers. So with that being said, we did receive a large batch of batteries last week. And when we tested the fitment, we were not satisfied and the dimensions did not meet what we had outlined to the manufacturer. So we sent them back and they're getting reworked. And there's other companies out there that may send those out. I mean, technically they fit, but it wasn't what we wanted. So once the batteries have been fixed, they'll be shipped back to us, and at that point, we will put them on our website. In the future, once we can develop a supply chain and we are aware of the speed at which the batteries come in and other variables like that, we would consider doing pre-orders, but that is not something we're doing now. And if you're absolutely in the need for a battery right now, there are other people out there selling them. But I'm not currently aware of anyone selling a battery with zero lead time at all. So keep that in mind. So related to the battery, another question we get a lot are, what are the specs of the battery going to be? So the general specs are, it's a 60 volt, 55 amp hour. It's capable of 180 amps continuous and 400 amps peak. A lot of people ask what cells we're using. We are not using the P42A cells. We've actually done testing with a whole variety of cells, including those, and have found that those have an absurdly high internal resistance. And what that means is you see a lot of voltage sag and heat generation in those cells. And while they do claim really high discharge ratings, you'll find that there are some problems with this claim that we'll get to in a second. So we tested a bunch of cells. We settled with a house brand cell from the manufacturer that we use, and we're not the kind of people who are just trying to find the cheapest cell. Like I said, we tested them. This one had the lowest voltage sag out of all the cells we tested. It had range that matched up to the amp hour if you're comparing relative to the stock batteries. So 55 amp hours should have around 1.75 times the range of stock, and it does. We've never had an instance where this battery got lower than 1.75 times range. And another thing to consider is that's running at double the power in comparison to the stock battery. So in addition to that, it is also constructed with cell holders. A lot of people skimp on the cell holders and will hot glue the batteries together. This is a really poor decision because forces will be transferring through your cells. And although cylindrical cells are stronger than pouch cells, for example, they're not really meant to be carrying the force of, for example, the ones on the bottom, every cell above it coming down on it during a jump. Another thing is we have a full-size BMS in it. Other companies will use a BMS simply for charging and then sell a bypass battery. That's not something we have any interest in doing. So the BMS in here is capable of outputting what the cells are capable of. And so are the interconnection, which is copper plated nickel stripping. So a lot of other companies, they'll use just pure nickel stripping, super thin, and then claim that their battery is capable of producing 400 amps, 500 amps, whatever it may be, continuously. And if you do an analysis, which we won't bore you with, on the cross section of stripping versus how much current it can carry through it, you'll find that there really isn't anyone selling a battery right now that has conductors capable of doing 500 amps continuous. Sure, the cells may be able to, but that's just the first line in the current carrying conductors path. So the connector's not rated for it, the wiring's not rated for it, the stripping's not rated for it. This battery, everything is rated for it except for the connector. And the reason we didn't change the connector is we want cross compatibility with stock. And in our testing, we found that this connector, we don't have issues with it at around 10 to 12 kilowatts, which is what this battery is rated for. So moving away from the power related specifications, the construction of the battery, as we mentioned, we use cell holders. We also use stainless steel plating in the direction of the load path. So perpendicular vertically is going to be a stainless steel plate on the bottom and top, and those are adhesive to the battery. And then on the sides of the battery, we're still contemplating whether we want to do steel on the sides, which increases weight, increases cost, is harder to manufacture, or something we've been looking at is super thick. It's a composite material, and based on the initial shear testing and impact testing that we've done, it seems to be as strong as thinner gauge stainless steel, if not stronger. So we're going to keep the steel top and bottom for sure, and that's stainless steel. And we're still trying to debate what we want to do on the sides, but know that you're going to be getting a battery that's well constructed and well tested for off-road riding. You can get away with a lot lower construction quality on a battery only meant for the road.
So another question that we hear quite a bit is, will the controller kit or the upgraded battery work on an X260? What's the compatibility there? I think there's been a spread of misinformation that may suggest to some people that the powertrain of the X160 or the small Sur Ron is equivalent to the powertrain of the X260 and the Sur Ron X. This is not true, unfortunately. Aside from just the suspension components, the voltage of the system being smaller on the smaller bikes, the motor is wound differently. It does look the same, but the internals are not equivalent. They are not designed to take the same amount of power, and they're not designed to output the same amount of torque. That being said, if you do get an upgraded battery and an upgraded controller kit, the wiring harness is the same. So yes, technically it is compatible, but they are not equivalent. If you are trying to upgrade your Sur Ron, we have to recommend, borderline insist, that you start with either the X260 or the Sur Ron X. If you throw a high system voltage, high amperage setup on the smaller bike, the smaller motor that isn't capable of it, well, it may be capable of it, but it's not designed for it. You'll end up with lower performance and a lot of heat buildup and just lower reliability across the board. So Do what you want with that information. However, we suggest going with the bigger bikes if you're trying to put, high output components on it.
And to be very specific there, running both bikes, an X160 and Sur Ron, at the same power level, they will not perform identically. So it's not just about how much power you're running through the motor. The actual winding, the magnets, all that plays a part.
The stall torque of the motor is much lower with the smaller bikes.
So another question we get is how waterproof are the controllers that we sell? We've answered this on our website as well as in the install video. The controllers are not waterproof, and I wouldn't ever say that there's something you can do to make them waterproof. You could get them a very good water resistance rating, but we cannot sell them in that form, and I'll explain why. So the stock controller does not use a modular harness design. So as you can see in this clip here, there is wires coming out that are like literally siliconed into the stock controller, and that doesn't allow any ingress of water. And with our kit, we sell a harness that you have to clip into the connectors seen here. And those connectors are not waterproof. You can add grease to them, you can add silicone to them, dielectric grease and silicone. And that will make it far more water resistant if you just add it around the outside of the connector. But I would never call it waterproof. You can also add silicone over the top of each terminal lug, as that can be a potential place of water ingress. We've never had water issues. We always spray down our bikes. We don't silicone our plugs in place. But with that being said, it is absolutely not waterproof.
And I do want to say that for most people, the resistance, though, will be adequate. We do, pretty wet and muddy off-roading, living in Oregon here. And, we have taken it through very adverse conditions, lots of splash, at some points, quick submersion, and we have not had any issues. That being said, I would not ever recommend submerging your controller underwater, especially while it is energized. So, while we may have not had any issues, riding it hard, that's not to say that issues can't happen. So, water spraying up from your front tire, just riding around in the rain, you're fine. But I would really be cautious, going through a river or something like that.
Another question we get asked is, can I run more power on a bypass battery than what you recommend? And for our own liability, we will not say that you can run more power than what the cell spec sheet says that you can. The spec sheet, I believe, says like somewhere around 110 amps continuously, which is around 7,000 watts or so on a full charge. And a lot of people ask, can I run 8,000, 9,000, 10,000? I have a friend who runs 12,000 and doesn't have any problems. Something important to note about power being drawn from a cell, there's not like a hard limit where you're like, okay, if you go above this, the cell's just gonna explode or catch on fire. What the rating means is that if you have a continuous rating of 110 amps, you can pull 110 amps from full charge to full discharge, and you're not going to run into overheating issues. Sure, you can run more power than that, but you have a time limit now, and that time limit is basically how long until the cell starts to overheat. Now, we're not going to get into the specifics of what those time limits are. It's different for every cell, and we don't even have enough information on the stock battery to say what that time is. So we're going to recommend that you run 7,000, as that's what the spec sheet says. We've ran more, we've seen people run more and not had issues. Another concern is voltage sag, which we've also covered before. And running above 7,000, which already creates a ton of voltage sag on the stock Panasonic cells, is just going to create even more, build more heat. The cells have a lower lifespan when you run them harder, and for the sake of this question, 7,000 is what we always recommend.
I would like to add something here and say that increasing the amount of power you're demanding from your cells will increase the mechanical stress that you are putting on the materials in those cells, and it will decrease the lifespan. And when you look at kind of how a cell degrades, you start out with a pretty high capacity, and as that cell goes through its lifetime, usually measured in charge cycles, going to empty and then charging back up, it builds material on the positive and negative terminals, as well as deterioration within the actual material properties of the cell. And as it goes through its life cycle, you get a decrease in capacity. So when you first got your bike, you might see this with your smartphone, when it starts not lasting very long and you feel like you need to get a new one, it's going to start losing range. And the more power you demand from it, the faster that your capacity is going to degrade. And at a certain point, it's going to be done and you're going to need a new one. We typically recommend, if you are going to bypass your battery and you're going to start pulling a lot of power out and asking a lot of those cells, you should factor in your mind that at some point in time you're probably going to need to make an upgrade to another battery, because you are putting a lot of stress on those cells.
Another question we saw was, what software do we use to tune the controllers? So we sell ASI controllers only as of now, and ASI controllers come with their own proprietary tuning software that is dealer access only, meaning you have to sign agreements with ASI to get the credentials you need to log into the app. But a lot of people are familiar with this app. It's pretty straightforward. And it's what we've always used to tune all the controllers. There's a desktop and a mobile version. Both work pretty much the same.
Another question that we have been seeing recently is people asking about our opinions on the Talaria Sting. And if you don't know what it is, you might want to give it a Google, and you'll probably find out that it has an uncanny resemblance with the Sur Ron X. It features similar suspension, similar geometries, similar construction, but if you compare the price and the specs to that of the Sur Ron, it seems to be a better option, slightly larger, slightly more powerful. So yeah, we love to see competitors come into the market, give Sur Ron a reason to step up the game, make new changes, and we do plan on testing one of these bikes out and making a video on it, and yeah, we're excited. So only time will tell how that holds up to the Sur Ron though. Another question that we get fairly often is people asking us about what's in the pipeline for Sur Ron Suspension. Is there anything new coming up? And the answer to that is, we have seen some companies being in development for rear shocks that would are sprung and kind of designed for the forces of the Sur Ron, and they're kind of like a burlier mountain bike shock. So that'll be exciting to see how that unfolds. And for forks, there's really nothing in the pipeline. There are some people that have tried putting on small displacement dirt bike suspension components on the Sur Ron, but it creates a lot of complexity, especially when you get into mounting it and also getting the brakes to fit on there and work with cohesion with the rest of the bike. And there's something to be said for the lightweight nature of mountain bike components. There's a balance between weight and rigidity, and everybody has their own opinions on the topic. I think keeping it low weight for a middleweight bike like the Sur Ron is good and favorable, but to do that and still get good suspension performance and rigidity, you end up spending upwards of $1,000 on a top level mountain bike fork, and for a lot of people that's not something that they want to spend their money on. So only time will tell if components start being made specifically for these middleweight e-bikes.
And if you go around to any of the companies who currently make components designed for the mountain bike, it seems between all of these companies that when you ask them or tell them what you're trying to find suspension for, it really shuts them down a lot. The moment they hear motorcycle or electric motorcycle or high-powered e-bike, that's really a market they're trying to stay away from. I don't know if it's for insurance reasons or what it is, but but there are tens of thousands of Sur Rons being sold every month. I think personally that there's a huge market for someone to do something like that. Obviously, an entire suspension company is a huge capital expense, so don't expect someone to just start up and have a huge supply available, but we would like to see one of the major mountain bike suppliers design maybe a burlier version of what they already have. So another question we get related to our kit and other people's kits are cutting issues with the BAC controllers, and there is a whole host of reasons for this or that can cause this to occur. So we're going to make an entire video just on this subject, but we're going to discuss a couple of things right now, just in a condensed version. So on our website, the kit is rated for 12 kilowatts at 400 amps, 400 phase amps. And so if you're running 430, as we've stated in our setup video, note that that is the explicit limit of the controller. And based on sensor noise and other variables, this can cause a cutting issue. So right off the bat, if you are having an issue with that, we recommend trying to turn down the phase amps a little bit. This is less of an issue on the 8000 as that has a higher phase amp overhead. However, more phase amps exponentially increase heat generation in the motor. On our bike specifically, we have tested up to 16 kilowatts and 430 phase amps, and we've never run into any cutting issues. And a lot of people think we run some special tune. That's not the case at all. What the latest batch of controllers ship with is precisely what is on our bikes. We don't really have any reason to do something special that we're not giving to our customers. And one of the things we've noticed is that we've done data logging across different bikes, and for example, if you have two bikes at 12 kilowatts and 430 phase amps, we've noticed that if you track the motor current on both bikes, there can be a considerable amount of variability, even both bikes being ran the same, like going full throttle from a stop and winding it out. Sometimes it'll hit the limit, sometimes it won't hit the limit and you think it should. But at the end of the day, a cutting issue is because the bike is seeing that the motor current is hitting the limit of the controller, which is 430 phase amps. And so when we run 430 phase amps on our bikes and we data log it, it actually only ever hits about 400, sometimes up to 410. And so we're never hitting that limit and it's never causing cutting issues. Other things that can lead to it are the Hall positioner, the Hall sensor itself. It's not uncommon at all for both of those or one or the other to come loose and move out of position. The moment one of those move out of position, it's different from what our tune says it should be, and that can cause a cutting issue, or that will cause a cutting issue. So one of the things you can do is open up the side cover that's the non-drive side of the motor. You can leave the bike in, and if you see on your Hall sensor bolts visible slippage and your bike's cutting a lot, that should be an indication to you that your Hall sensor has probably slipped. Other issues that we've seen where a bike's Hall offset is just way out of range from what we'd expect, a simple motor calibration can fix it. And then there's bikes where no motor calibration fixes it, turning down the power doesn't fix it, and we've had a couple instances of that, and we've always suggested getting a new motor. And for the people who have gotten new motors, I think that's always fixed the issue for them. I can't say specifically what's causing the issue, but we've noticed that people who've overheated their motors or constantly run them at high power, we notice magnet degradation, and with high magnet degradation, your motor spins faster, and we notice cutting issues far more frequently with those motors.
If your bike was working for quite a long period of time while you were running at high power levels, and then all of a sudden you start experiencing this kind of stuttering under hard acceleration, that is a symptom of, an overheated motor. So unfortunately, there's not much you can do at that point.
Yeah, and that can also be a Hall sensor slippage issue too, which it seems to be less common, but both things are something that you should consider when there are cutting issues. Every manufacturer who sells these controllers, the 4000 in particular, you'll see that people have cutting issues, and that's the nature of dealing with electric motors, is that everyone is slightly different, and your tune cannot possibly account for the entire range. You can mask certain settings to try and trick the controller, but at the end of the day, there's just going to be some controllers that need additional tuning. We try to have ours as dialed as possible. I'm unaware of anyone who has 100% success rate with the controllers they sell. I would say 80 to 90% of the ones we sell do not have issues, but there's always a select few, and we're happy to help and work with customers in figuring that issue out. So that concludes the Q&A session. Of course, any other comments or questions, you can leave them below or send us an email. A lot of people try to contact us through Instagram DMs or Facebook Messenger. Email is the best way. That's where we see it most. Our DMs are a nightmare. So if you wonder why we're not responding there, it's because there's hundreds of people trying to ask questions there. Email's the best route. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, giving it a thumbs up. We're gonna have a lot more videos coming out in the future, especially as spring comes around, we can start riding more. Have a nice day.